Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Ghost Killer, a Japanese action flick from 2024. When college student Fumika stumbles upon the bullet that ended hitman Kudo's life, his vengeful spirit takes hold of her body. Now, possessed by a ruthless assassin's rage and skills, she becomes an unstoppable force, hunting down those responsible for his death. As the body count rises, the line between Fumika and Kudo begins to blur. From Kensuke Sonomura, the action director of Hydra, Baby Assassins, 1% Warrior, and Bad City, Ghost Killer delivers a furious tale of supernatural revenge. Now, the opening scene is a brief attack involving three men with knives who fight one guy who is a hitman, played by Masanori Mimoto, a regular collaborator with this director. It's short and maybe a little bit difficult to see all the moves given the dim lighting, but it's a decent start. The hitman dies, and his blood absorbs the bullet casing, which is left on the ground. And then our girl protagonist, played by Akari Takaishi, normal everyday girl, hangs out at bars. She orders Ardbeg scotch at one point, so I was impressed. Already some good character development. She fends off some boring men, and then she trips on the street and touches this bullet casing, and then now she's got a problem because the ghost inhabits her body, haunts her, talks to her, and controls her body to kill for revenge. And she's shocked by these events, but this ghost is somewhat respectful. Seems like a decent ghost. He actually talks to her like a normal human being, so maybe they can help each other when all is said and done. Now, you may have recognized Akari Takaishi as one of the actresses from the Baby Assassins movies. I enjoyed those. I still have not seen the third one yet. I'll get to it soon. But she was the less athletic of the two actresses. Saori Izawa was the athletic one who handled the more difficult hand-to-hand fight scenes in those movies. And she's not in this. So Takaishi, on the other hand, helped with the comedy, and she typically used guns during her fight scenes, or action scenes. So going into Ghost Killer, I did partially question the casting decision. Yes, she is the better actress of the two, but I would have probably defaulted to the one who could carry the action better. And as it turns out, I was partially correct with my concern. So Takaishi does have charisma, and there's definitely a comedic slant to Ghost Killer, which you may not have recognized with the plot synopsis, but there's an element of humor in here that's noticeable. I don't know if I would call it an action comedy, but it's an action with a healthy sprinkling of comedy. And our protagonist, for example, has a few daydream scenes that were pretty funny. And, they do use the premise for some gags, because this girl does not know how to fight. She's a normal girl. She acts normally when the ghost is not possessing her. But then when the ghost jumps into her body, her enemies do not expect her to be able to defend herself with ruthless aggression, So that does lend to some comedy. And this creates some effective, situational humor that's amusing. And I will say this, though. The situational humor is kind of de-emphasized during the finale, because by that time, the bad guys know that she's a threat by the end of the film. Now, in terms of action, her first confrontation is with a few low-level thugs at a bar, or I guess con artists, and it's a good scene. The choreography in this film is what you would expect from this action director if you've seen his prior films. And to this actress's credit, she does a pretty good job in this. She's kind of slippery, difficult to hit, uses precise strikes instead of power, which would make sense given her body type and her ability in real life. One thing you'll notice, though, is that the filmmakers almost betray their core concept during the second half, choosing instead to have Masanori Mimoto do the fights himself. So the first, act of the film, a little bit more than that, they're showing this little girl who somehow knows how to kick butt. But then they change, and they're like, oh, no, we're going to show the ghost instead of the body that it's possessing, which I felt like they were kind of cheating with that one. Perhaps a little bit of a cop-out, because maybe the final fight in this movie's good, and she probably couldn't handle it. So they're like, hey, let's just show Mamoto do the fighting instead. So it felt a little weird. It did. The good news is that it's fun to watch Miyamoto fight anyway. And the finale, as I said, is legit. It's exactly what you would expect from this collaboration with this director. The film is worth watching for that scene alone, actually. Although it does feel very similar to the fights from like Hydra and a few other ones from this director. But the quality of the action in this is good. I did feel the film had some pacing issues, though, primarily because there's, not that much action, which could be considered a criticism of Hydra as well. Like our second fight with our protagonist doesn't really show up until like after the hour mark. So I was, that middle act, I was fidgeting a bit in my seat, I was hoping they'd move it along or throw in an extra fight scene in the middle. So yeah, I felt like the non-action stuff in this film maybe was a little bit more stagnant, just slightly more stagnant than some of his other films, even if by a slight margin. Also, there's not much time spent with the antagonists. It would have been nice to at least, maybe during that middle act, build up one of the let's have like the main bodyguard get a few fights or something during the middle to kind of ramp him up a bit to build some anticipation for the finale, but they didn't really do that. So I still enjoyed Ghost Killer. I mean, this is like a good flick from this director, but I feel like there's just little things that they could have adjusted to make it a little bit more consistent. But I recommend it, especially if you're a fan of this guy's prior films. Currently available streaming on Amazon. It's also available on physical media. So if you've seen this one, how would you rank it compared to Sonomura's other like action-directed movies? Because there's been some reviews of this who think it's like really good, but I'm not quite on that level with it. But let me know what you think. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.